On today's video, in celebration of my 30th birthday, let's talk about a few of my favorite things.
It's morphin' time!
Hello, this is Soundout here, and on today's video, we're talking about a few of my favorite things. This is not really a super structured video, but it's my birthday this week, so I thought I can just do what I want. So because of that, I'm just going to share some stuff that are my favorite things from different media. I'm not going to talk about toys as much because I feel like I talk about my favorite toys a lot. Like, obviously, I love Marvel Legends. Like, look at all this. It's not pictured, all the stuff in boxes. I've put a ton into that. I mean, if we want to go crazy over here, I love DC Universe Classics. That's probably my favorite toy line of all time, just based on completion percentage. But in terms of, like, you know, favorite toy line, probably Marvel Legends, probably something like that. I talk about comics a lot. I threw some comics in here, but I was like, let's not make it a toy-focused video, just to be a little different. And then I was thinking, I was like, what is some stuff I've not talked about enough on the channel? So I threw some of that in, but there will be some hardcore favorites for those that follow the channel, and maybe some of these things won't be super surprises, but we'll see what happens. I mean, I'm going to talk about Ghost Rider in T-minus like 3 minutes, so it's not super surprising, but I do want to talk about some of my favorite things. So let's just kind of go through it. I got some movies, I got some TV shows, I've got some comics, and I've got some video games, which I don't talk about video games on the channel much because YouTube, if you make a video about video games, YouTube kind of tries to throw your whole channel into the video game category, and it's like a whole different world. So I don't talk about it as much, but I got a little bit of that in here. So yeah, this is going to be kind of fun. If you enjoy something like this, a little bit more casual chat, hit the like button, hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss out. If this is your first video of mine on the channel, I do a lot of different stuff. So go check out the other stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff on the channel. A lot of stuff that's probably more heavily edited and produced and planned out than this is. This is very much just off the top of my head, talking about my favorite things. So let's get to it. I'm going to start with comic books because I think some of these won't be surprises if you spend enough time on the channel. But yeah, I want to talk about my favorite comics. Okay, so I've read literally thousands of comic books, so I could easily make like a top 50 for every publisher. So we're not going to do that because that would just be multiple separate videos. This is just kind of a broad overview, and I was like, I basically just decided to pick like kind of one in each category, if that makes sense. So first of all, my favorite DC comic of all time, Crisis on Infinite Earths. This is not like the most like obscure, random, hardcore pick to choose. This one is just super meaningful to me as a DC fan. Because basic timeline-wise, like when I started transitioning from like reading comics sort of casually as a kid, I had subscriptions to like the animated tie-in comics, like the Batman Strikes or Justice League Unlimited or Teen Titans Go. I had those like coming through the mail. But as I started to transition into like a more, I'm going to explore more of comic books, it was around 2010, 2011-ish, and basically around that time, I was like really into watching the DC direct-to-video animated movies, which always had bonus features talking about the comics they were adapted from, and that got me really interested into comics. It's something I wish they would do more. And it's kind of nice. Superman and Fantastic Four have been doing a little bit more comic referential stuff with their live-action movies, but DC animated movies, they'd be like, oh, here's, you know, Under the Red Hood, let's talk about how this ended up happening, what's the story of Jason Todd and all that. So I learned a lot from those movies, and so it made me go look for comics. The thing was that a lot of times in those behind-the-scenes features, they talk about Crisis on Infinite Earths. It was this big event that changed the DC Universe forever. And so I was at my comic shop, because by that point I had a pull box and everything, and I was going, and I saw, you know, Crisis on Infinite Earths, Marv Wolfman, George Perez, the classic event comic. It's like the big event comic that kind of started off big event comics. I've grown to a point where I just don't even like event comics anymore. So it's kind of funny that my favorite DC comic of all time is an event comic. But what this was Marv and George doing a tribute to the DC Universe for the 50th anniversary. It did change the course of DC forever and comic books in a lot of ways, but I learned about so many characters that I had no idea about by reading Crisis. They would give me glimpses of characters like Blue Beetle, glimpses of characters like Dr. Fate, who are now like my all-timer favorite DC characters. The reason why it's sealed in plastic wrap, I've talked about this, I think, in another video. I did have the absolute pleasure to meet Marv Wolfman and George Perez at two different conventions, a couple years apart. They signed both of this. I don't want to open it up because it's got their signatures in it. It's very precious to me, not because, you know, their signatures are like, oh, this is the value of the signatures, but because this is the trade I first read the series in, and I have it signed by both of its creators, and that means a whole lot to me on a personal level. And I'm basically a big DC fan because of this comic. That's why it's my favorite one. So on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, I picked my favorite Marvel comic. And the way I looked at it is I looked at my shelf. I have, you know, huge, and that's the DC side, but I have a huge Marvel stuff. I got a ton. X-Men, Fantastic Four, all kinds of stuff I absolutely love. There's a ton of things I could pick from. I have signed copies of like Days of Future Past and Dark Phoenix, that stuff like that. But what is the Marvel comic I have read the most? It is All New Ghost Rider. So I was, you know, because I was kind of going into history a bit, because I was such a big DC fan, I was not really looking at anything Marvel. I kind of stayed away from Marvel. Nothing was pulling me over to Marvel because I was really just into DC and learning more about DC, especially after reading Crisis. The thing that caught my attention at Marvel, though, was Ghost Rider, because I had seen Ghost Rider in the 90s Fantastic Four cartoon and some other things. And so I was like, oh, Ghost Rider's really cool. I'd like to read more about him. And I think one of the first Ghost Rider runs I picked up was the Daniel Way run, which was actually pretty cool. But then this came out, and this just seemed so different and exciting. Because this is Robbie Reyes, who is a Ghost Rider in this series. He is downright top 3 Marvel characters for me. It's like, basically, I mean, if I was going to make like a top 3 for Marvel characters, it's probably like, it's probably, you know, so obviously Robbie Reyes, Ghost Rider. I can't rank them above each other. It's Storm from X-Men, and then probably Doctor Doom as like my top 3 Marvel characters in terms of heroes. You know, he's ranks still in the top 3, and then I throw Star-Lord into the top 3 because I really like Peter Quill. The reason why this book stood out to me was not just because it was very different from the other Ghost Riders, from, you know, Johnny Blaze and Danny Ketch, who I was a little bit more familiar with, but also just the way that this book's storytelling happens, I think, is really great, and it's sort of an overlooked series. It ran 12 issues prior to Secret Wars, which relaunched it. The first volume, it's all written by Felipe Smith, and the first volume was Tradmore on art. And so it has like Tradmore's kind of sort of over-expressive style, which I really, really like, where everything's like exaggerated, but it's exaggerated in such an interesting way that no matter what it is that you're looking at, like, it's just a visually gorgeous book. And it's a real shame it's only ever been printed in paperback, and there's not like an omnibus, because I think it's like one of the most beautiful like art books I've ever seen. And then Damon Scott did the art on volume 2, and it took a different approach, but it's still very stylistic and very cool. So love this series. If you never checked it out, it's hard because right now it's out of print, which is ridiculous. This is my favorite Marvel comic. I've read this through probably like 3 or 4 times, maybe more than that. I don't reread comics that often, but like things like Crisis, things like this, I can read all the time. Stay tuned on the channel. I do want to talk about Ghost Rider some more, because I feel like a lot of people on YouTube that cover comics, and this is no shade to anybody, of course, because there's a ton of comics out there, not a lot of people know Ghost Rider. They know of Ghost Rider, but do they know Ghost Rider? At least the way I do. So now I think I've just decided what this other video this week's going to be. All right, breaking outside of Marvel and DC, it's Hellboy. I know this isn't like the craziest pick, but I really just love Hellboy. Mike Mignola really just had like has had like a knack for like throwing a bunch of elements together and making it work. And I absolutely love the Hellboy universe for that. There is so many wacky characters. There's, you know, an undead spirit of a 40s pulp hero that can't you know, rest until all the Nazis are dead. So, you know, Lobster Johnson's always kicking around. There's just so many great characters, from Hellboy to Abe Sapien to Liz Sherman to all the other BPRD characters like Johann Kraus, and so many. Like, every time you open a Hellboy universe comic, you're gonna get something great, and I think that's the coolest part about it. Because even when Mignola's not like the one and sole creator on it, especially going into like the BPRD stuff with John Arcudi and some of the other spin-offs, like, all of it is very interesting. It's like lore-based and mythological-based, and elements pulled from like movies and comics and TV shows. So it kind of pulls together this whole universe that kind of feels like, and I think also because I love all these things too, it feels like a universe pulled together from just so many things and so much love. So if you can sense a theme with comics I like, it's people with demonic powers or look demonic looking but are actually good people. And so if I was going through my manga collection, and obviously I love One Piece. I mean, obviously I love One Piece. But the thing is I was kind of thinking about it, and I was like, okay, which manga am I picking? Which is going to be like the shonen manga, right? Because I was like, I need a shonen manga. I have another manga choice here in a moment. I was like, what's the shonen manga? Devilman. It really is. There is a lot of manga, like Chainsaw Man pulls a lot from Devilman. Devilman is like one of the quintessential works of manga history in a lot of ways. It pushed the envelope. It broke down some barriers, and it really is kind of incredible. It's also totally insane. My favorite part of Devilman is the part they don't adapt, which is where they like have to travel through time and save Joan of Arc from demons. Yeah, this is a nutty book, and it's just like Hellboy. I feel like we've gotten some good adaptations that are good material. Like the Hellboy, like the Guillermo del Toro movies are great for movies. They're not as great adaptations of Hellboy, just like Devilman Crybaby is a great anime, but it's not like the best Devilman manga adaptation, for at least the original. It's one of those things I don't know if it's possible, again, because it may just be that it only works as a comic, but just this story is, this is a very mature book, which is why it's kind of funny it was published in a magazine aimed at boys. But this is a very mature book in a lot of ways because of its themes as well. There's a lot of like correlations to religion and everything, but the main thing that's the heart and soul of this is that you have Fudo Akira, who is the nicest kid at school, gets picked on by bullies all the time. He has a friend who's a huge bad influence, and through some stuff that his friend does, he goes along with because he's just such a nice guy, he ends up becoming a devil. And so he becomes Devilman, but because he still has this human heart, he's fighting against the other devils that are just trying to prey on humans and stuff. But he also gets kind of revenge on his bullies and gets a more confident personality. But it's sort of like a pendulum swing where he goes from like the nicest guy ever to kind of being an asshole. So it's kind of one of those interesting tales where it's like, but it's also like, be careful who you trust is I think the moral of the story, because he trusted his friend. He trusted Rio so much that he didn't question the summoning of demonic forces to a rave. Well, maybe it wasn't a rave back in the 60s, but the point being, in a nightclub, having demons being summoned to it was probably a bad move. And Akira never questions it because he just trusts his friend so much. So I think there's a lot of good life lessons in this book, but yeah, it's very mature. I do not know the status of the printing of these 7 Seas hardcovers, but this is absolutely, I think, if I'm picking one shonen manga from the entire history of the genre, this is the one. I really can't pick any others. So I love me some cyberpunk. Here's my cyberpunk manga pick. It's Ghost in the Shell. Sometimes I feel like I pick things, I'm like, this is my favorite thing. Like, yeah, no duh, it's like the popular one of that genre, but there's a reason why Ghost in the Shell is popular. And it is the first anime movie, and oh my god, there's another continuing theme here. This also does not have a great adaptation. There's a lot of great Ghost in the Shell media. I think, Standalone Complex is amazing. I love the original film. And I've watched all the Ghost in the Shell anime stuff. Great stuff. This is a completely different thing. The premise is the same, but this is a completely different book. Motoko is so much of a different character. She's a goofy little, gremlin in this book. She has weird, wacky facial expressions. There's more comedy. It's not so serious and dour. Shiro Masume's Ghost in the Shell manga is a different experience than the anime. And Science Saru's upcoming adaptation looks to be closer to the manga, at the very least design-wise, and I'm really curious if that'll translate to tone and style, because it would be kind of fun. It's gonna go completely over so poorly with the general public that only knows the anime versions of Ghost in the Shell. But as a manga fan, I really, really hope that it's actually going to be closer to the manga, because it'd be so nice after all these adaptations to get that. It's kind of like we kind of got that with Devilman Crybaby, which I think was also Science Saru. More on that in a moment. We kind of got that with Devilman Crybaby. I felt like that was the closest adaptation, but it still wasn't quite this. So maybe we'll get something like that where it's a little bit of a hybrid of the adaptations you're used to seeing, plus more manga elements thrown in. But looking forward to that next year. But I can't recommend this enough if you love cyberpunk storytelling. It's great. Okay, so this is also not going to be a surprising pick in terms of like overall popularity, but this is still kind of, I think, a niche enough subject. In terms of original graphic novels, Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim by Brian Lee O'Malley. I first saw the movie. The movie was the first exposure I had to this. Played the video game. Then I got into reading the comic when they did the full color edition, because this was originally printed in black and white. It was originally printed in black and white, and boom, look at that full color. I like the color edition. They've reprinted it, of course, in both versions. But it was kind of done in sort of a manga style. That was kind of like his intention. This series is so great. It's basically, if someone's in their 20s and they're trying to figure out their life, this is the book to read. It really is. Because it's written from that perspective of someone in their 20s who's still trying to figure out their life. If you're in your 20s and you're going through stuff and trying to figure out, what do I do? How do I go through this? This is like the guidebook to the 20s. Not necessarily as in like follow Scott Pilgrim's precious little life here, but in terms of like what not to do and some mistakes you can avoid with relationships and jobs and all kinds of stuff and having to fight 7 evil exes. It's great. And the great part about this, and this is the thing I do like about this, is that Scott Pilgrim, of course, there was the live action movie, which I adore. It's great. Edgar Wright did a great job. It's different. It's different. There's some characters that don't exist in the movie. The ending's different because the ending in the comic hadn't been written yet. It's different. It's really different. Then the video game, of course, takes a little bit different approach. It's a video game. Then they did the Netflix series, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off? And that, they kind of advertised it looked like it was going to be an adaptation of the comic in the comic's art style. It actually ended up being a sequel to the comic that also works as a sequel to the movie because of the way the story worked out. So the original Scott Pilgrim comic is something you can only experience as a comic book, and I kind of appreciate that for integrity of the medium. It would have been kind of cool to see, because Science Saru did that, just like they did, Devilman and Ghost of the Shell. I really hope they did Devilman. If they didn't, it's going to be a lot of comments. But anyways, the adaptations, I think, have been interesting for Scott Pilgrim because no two Scott Pilgrim stories are alike. And I think that's actually kind of fun. But it also does keep it as like, you want the original story, you're going to have to read the original comic. And yeah, it's totally worth it. Absolutely adore this series. And again, highly recommend it if you're in your, I kind of want to read it now that I'm turning 30. I want to be like, okay, so how'd I do in my 20s compared to good old Scott Pilgrim and his crazy friends here? But yeah, let's talk about some movies. Okay, so just like with comics, I've watched a ton of movies. I could probably make a top 50 movies of all times video, and I kind of might be trying to do that. I'll let you guys know in the future. It would take a lot of hard choices because I really love movies. It's the art form I know the best because it's the one I know how to make. I've gone to school for it. I've worked in it. I've worked in the movies, so I know movies probably better than I know anything else. Like, I talk about comics from like a reader perspective. I talk about video games from a player perspective. I talk about movies from the perspective of I know how things are made. And so sometimes like people are like, how did you give this much praise to this movie? Because I saw the effort put into it. Sometimes that's all it takes. And the only times that I really dislike a movie is that they do something horribly offensive, like on a morality level, or you can tell they didn't put the effort in. Because any movie that put the effort in, even if it's not good at the end of the day, was still like a worthwhile job by everyone involved. And so for me, I find a lot of movies to be, watchable because I can see the effort put in. So I was like, how do I do this segment? And I picked I went and pulled my 4 favorite films that I put on Letterboxd. Because on Letterboxd, they're like, you can set your 4 favorite films. I'm like, how am I supposed to pick that? So what I did, and maybe nobody knows this because I don't think I wrote this in my Letterboxd profile. My 4 favorite films are not necessarily, these are my top 4 favorite movies of all time. These are just 4 movies so you understand my taste in movies. So I thought it'd be fun for this as kind of a correlation. By the way, there's a link to my Letterboxd in the description if you want to follow. I thought it'd be fun if I just pulled the 4 favorite movies that are supposed to be the barometers for my taste in movies. So let's do it. All right. So first up, Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first Indiana Jones film. Do I think this is the best Indiana Jones film? It's debatable. I think his Last Crusade is so good. You could like flip-flop between them. But I do put Raiders because Raiders, I think, still is the blueprint for this and for a lot of things. The way that it pulls in what made like the great movie serials of the 30s and 40s, what made those work is in this movie. This has like the old school Hollywood practices that made movies so great, and it's just, there's nothing bad I can say about it. And I think also, in general, this is like one of the more better aged movies of the original three. But I love it, and I could watch this movie any day. I could watch parts of this movie at any time. I was at the Academy Museum in Los Angeles, which is like for the Motion Picture Academy, and they had a room all about like sound editing, and they were just playing like the boulder scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they were going through like the layers of sound editing, and I kind of knew the process, but I just sat there for like 15-20 minutes just watching them kind of piece the scene together layer by layer, from like dialogue to scratch track to the sound effects to the music and all that. And it's like, I've seen that scene so many times, but I could watch that on loop because I love the process of making movies, sometimes even more than watching the movies. So it's just a great movie. But it's essentially, it's my pick, as I really love action films, and I really love movies that reference the past while doing something new with it and charting a new course for the future. So that's what the Raiders pick is on my 4 favorite films. All right, The Nightmare Before Christmas. This is, for a long time I said this was my favorite movie of all time. I've seen a lot of movies. It's still in my top. It's in my top. Like, if I do a top 50 movies, it's going to be alphabetical because it's like picking your favorite children. This is for animation. This is my pick for animation. I love animation, but I really love when animation breaks trends. This is my, it's not like, I don't know, sometimes it sounds snobby when I say that, but there are a lot of animated movies that sort of homogenize art styles. Like, a lot of discussions been having about, like, and also this happens with my own memories, like, what's a Disney animated movie versus a Pixar, like, looks-wise. They kind of look the same. There are some art style differences, obviously. We could go into that, as a deeper sense. But in a broad sense, a lot of Disney's output looks the same, whether it's Disney or Pixar. Stuff like that. Like, stuff that's like, oh, we did the Shrek worked, let's repeat that art style. But I love when animation breaks a trend. And Night Before Christmas is a stop-motion film, which incredible amount of work. It's absolutely beautiful movie. Music is amazing. Vocal performances are great. But the big thing is that it does not look like stop-motion films prior to it. The techniques they used were new and different and interesting, and that always hits right for me when it comes to movies. When you're doing something that's a established style, but you can do something brand new with it. Wins me over pretty easily. Wins me over just as much as oneers do. Things that look like one camera movement for like an entire sequence. That wins me over every time because I know exactly how damn hard that is to do. So anyways, Night Before Christmas, it's a trendsetter in a lot of ways. There's some other movies that came later from some of the people that worked on this, but Henry Selick did such a great job directing this movie that I think I never want it to be touched. I never want a sequel. I never want anything added to this because it's so perfect as is. That's my pick for an animated film, just to represent all the animation trends broken. That is in my favorite films of all time. Okay, so this I don't have a single of because it's in here. The Wolfman. So the Universal monsters, obviously I love them. I tanked my channel's analytics to do an entire month referencing and homaging and talking about the classic monsters. I've recovered from that. It's all good. I love Month of Monsters. If you love the classic Universal monsters, go check out my Month of Monsters series. I will be linking it because I really loved it. Anyways, I loved making Month of Monsters. Those were the most fun things to do on the channel. Point being, Wolfman. That's my pick because I think all of these movies, the classic Universal Monsters movies, sort of built the template for movies going forward. They were some of the first film series to have multiple sequels. They had crossovers, which was never heard of really before. They basically had the first cinematic universe, and they were doing it back in the 30s. So, yeah, I think that a lot of modern Hollywood owes a lot to the classic monsters. And it's kind of a shame that they've never been able to pull a new version of a classic monster and make it work. It just hasn't. They've been trying for years, hasn't quite worked. And I think the reason why is because these films just broke out and were going for something different, but iconic. Iconography is a big thing. Like the most recent Wolfman movie, their werewolf design was bad. It was just bad. I don't even know how to put it in nicer terms. It didn't look like a werewolf. make it look like a werewolf, and maybe the whole thing will start to come together. There's a lot of things to do in that sense. Never give up on these classic monsters, but the reason I picked Wolfman is because Wolfman is not based on a book. Frankenstein, Dracula, based on books. Wolfman wasn't. It was essentially, even though it pulled elements from the existing mythology of werewolves, even though a Werewolf of London previously existed, the Wolfman movie itself manages to kind of stand out as like an original movie that worked for Universal's monsters, and I think it's great. And I also think that it's kind of the template for like monster movies going forward. And of any type of horror movies, monster movies are my absolute favorite. And then my fourth in the favorite films, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. The reason I put this one down, because I love all the Planet of the Apes movies. I've made a bunch of videos on apes, if you're interested. I even went to the filming locations for Conquest. Go check that video out. That was a blast. I love movies. Anyways, Conquest, the reason why I picked Conquest over all the others is not necessarily saying it's the best one, but this movie has so much to say. And it's done in a science fiction setting. It's done through apes, but it's so much about humanity and people and how we treat other living beings. And it does not do it in a shy way. It throws it straight in your face. And that boldness to tell a story about present-day society through the lens of futuristic sci-fi storytelling is why that's on the list. I love science fiction using its setting for allegory, but I also love when they're super bold about it and really in your face. And Conquest did that, and that's what I love about Conquest. I love that it just absolutely hits you in the head with what it's trying to say about how, basically people fear things that are different, fear people who are different, and will try to oppress those people out of existence instead of letting them be part of society and making society better. And that is what I love about Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, not just on every other level of a movie, but that's what it's there for. It's to represent all the science fiction that tells us and tries to teach us lessons about our society and its failings through the storytelling lens of science fiction, which is why it's one of the greatest genres in literacy that does not get enough credit. Because all people see with this sometimes is, look at all the monkeys, not what they're trying to say, if you actually sit down and watch it. Okay, so let's talk video games. I've got a couple examples. I love video games, but I'm not a hardcore video game person, but I used to play a lot more. I've been reading more comics in recent years than playing games, but I do love my video games. That being said, some of these examples not necessarily have stuck with me as much. First things first, Cyberpunk 2077. Cyberpunk as a genre, you've already known I love it. I've already brought it up like 2 or 3 times. Love the Cyberpunk genre. This isn't a franchise yet because the second game isn't out yet, but Cyberpunk 2077 I've adored. I put probably 300 plus hours into it. I played it. I bought it for Switch 2 before I had a Switch 2. That's because it came with stickers. It came with stickers, okay? I'm a sucker for stickers. Absolutely just, I adore the game. I love the storytelling. I love the setting. I love the extra media. I love edge runners as well. I love the world of Cyberpunk, going back to the tabletop RPG games, which is kind of where we got the name Cyberpunk from. Yeah, great game. Absolutely. I play this game because I have it on PS5, and I played it on a base model PS4 when it launched. I fought through a lot of crashes. I finished the main story on a base model PS4. That was my dedication to this. I just love Cyberpunk. I can play that forever, honestly. I haven't even started a second save file after all this time. I've been playing the one save file. In terms of other narrative-based video game franchises, one I adore and I'm sad about is Assassin's Creed. So Assassin's Creed it's one of those I think, the phrase Ubisoft ran it into the ground feels apt. But it also just, I don't know, they kind of screwed it up for me. And I want to explain why. So I don't have a lot of the games physically, that's why I just brought out the guidebook. So Assassin's Creed, for those that aren't aware, is not a historical period piece video game series. It's a sci-fi series. The main plot of the first game is that Desmond Miles has to be put back into his ancestors' memories to find the location of an artifact that they need in the present day. And this whole conflict between the Assassins Guild and the Knights Templar, it's goes throughout centuries in history. It's a great setup, where it's like, okay, in the present day, we don't fight these battles in person as much as we go find where these artifacts are through the memories of the people we're descended from. And as a history buff and a sci-fi fan, I love that stuff. It's unfortunate that the more the series has gone on, the less they do that. It is very frustrating for me. So they did change the gameplay style when they released Origins. Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla are more of like RPG games. They're a lot longer. They do a lot more big base building stuff. Gameplay-wise, I don't enjoy that as much. I did enjoy just kind of like, here's your list of things to do in this city. The last one I really, really enjoyed was Syndicate. And that's actually my favorite, maybe because it's set in London. I tend to like British things. I don't know. It's part of my wheelhouse. But I really want to love the more recent games, and the only one recently I was able to play a significant chunk of was Mirage, because it was more classic styled. But when Mirage did not cut to the present day to tell me what was going on in the current storyline, I started to zone out, and I just never finished it. I haven't touched Shadows either. I know Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla have some segments in present day, and I looked them up as cutscenes on YouTube, because they're only like 20 minutes of cutscenes, when they used to be a significant chunk of the game. As much as I do like the historical time period stuff, that part is fun, I was in it for the ongoing narrative between the games, and the more that shrunk, the less I cared. And so I haven't finished Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla, or Mirage. I haven't even picked up Shadows yet. Then again, because Ubisoft games usually go super cheap digitally eventually, I'm just kind of waiting. I really like Assassin's Creed, but I like the connections with the sci-fi story. I like science fiction. So it just bums me out. Now, that being said, I did really like the Assassin's Creed live-action movie because it leaned into the sci-fi stuff and the present-day storyline, and it actually has like a piece of Eden that's not in the game, so it all kind of ties together. They even have the movie stuff in this book. That's the stuff I like of Assassin's Creed, and that's the stuff they've kind of moved away from, which is such a bummer. Speaking of bummers, my favorite fighting game franchise might surprise you. I do a lot of videos on Marvel vs. Capcom. A lot of people love Marvel vs. Capcom, and with the collection, we've had a resurgence, and we got merchandise and stuff. I absolutely love Marvel vs. Capcom. I love Marvel. I love Capcom fighting games. I adore these games. Absolutely, I love that we got this collection. However, that's not my favorite fighting game franchise. It's Darkstalkers. You remember that classic monster thing I have going on? This is a fighting game of classic monsters, okay? You got, you can go like, yeah, that's Dimitri and Morrigan and Felicia, but that's like, a vampire, a succubus, a werewoman, a werewolf with Talbane /Garon. I really, really like Darkstalkers. And that's why, like, when they announced Capcom Fighting Collection, I started calling it Darkstalkers and Friends, because they finally let me have all the Darkstalkers games on a modern platform. They have not made a new game in like over 20 years, and I wish they would, and sometimes I wish they wouldn't, because like I sort of have like a love-hate relationship with Street Fighter 6, but the fact they put this collection out made me happy, because I was like, good, at least if you're not going to make a new Darkstalkers, at least you gave me all the games to work with. And I actually own it on 2 platforms. I have it on PS4 and on Switch, because I wasn't letting those games be locked to my PS3 forever, because that was the last time they released them. I love Darkstalkers. The characters are so interesting. I don't know why we don't get more Darkstalkers, because it's just so damn great. That's another franchise I love that doesn't get enough. F-Zero. It's my favorite racing game franchise. Absolutely love the F-Zero series. I don't have any of the physical games with me at the moment. My GameCube games are in a box, and I couldn't find the box for the video to pull out F-Zero GX, but F-Zero has not had a new game since F-Zero Climax in 2003? 2003 or 2004. Anyways, and that was only released in Japan until it hit the Nintendo Switch Online recently. But F-Zero is like an intense, high-octane, free-floating racing game. It was revolutionary. It pushed the limits on what racing games could be. The SNES to the N64 to the GameCube, which was also co-developed with an arcade version. I love F-Zero. Also, just like with Assassin's Creed, a lot of people are like, oh, the racing is the appeal. And I'm like, yes, it is. But the F-Zero characters are so damn cool. There's, like, for example, Pico. Look at that dude. He's a bounty hunter who's also a part-time racer. There's other characters like Leon. Leon's cool. There's so many different, like, neat, interesting characters in F-Zero. And there is an F-Zero anime. It also hasn't been re-released, but you can find it easily, especially the Japanese version that's actually complete. The English dub never was finished. That goes into all those characters and gives them more depth and personalities and stuff. And I think F-Zero is so cool. And it frustrates me every time there's like an interview with Miyamoto saying, well, we'd like to do an F-Zero, but we have to figure out how to revolutionize. And like, no, you don't. There's been so many F-Zero clones in the last 20 plus years. You could just make a straight ahead F-Zero game and people, I think, would eat it up because we haven't had one in so long. I think it would be absolutely great. I think revolutionizing Star Fox was what ruined Star Fox Zero. So I would love for F-Zero to not have that issue and just make a solid brand new F-Zero game. At least you can play F-Zero GX on Switch 2 now, which means if you have a Switch 2, you can play all the F-Zero games. GX, X on N64, F-Zero on Super Nintendo, F-Zero 99, which is a kind of clone port of, I mean, that's the closest thing to a new F-Zero we've gotten is F-Zero 99, which is like an online version of the SNES game. And then the Game Boy Advance games, there's 3 of them. They're all on Switch. So if you have a Switch 2, you can play all the F-Zero games. But I would love to see a new F-Zero because I really love those characters. But do you know what my favorite video game franchise is of all time? It's Metroid, by far. Not even a question. I'd like to say that F-Zero is my favorite video game franchise, but I have not gone to the lengths of F-Zero that I have for Metroid. I have played all the F-Zero games, obviously. There's not that many of them either. They're difficult, so I don't think I'm 100% in any of them. Metroid's my heart. If you're talking about video games, like I realized, especially this year, where I'm like, I don't need a Switch 2 until Metroid Prime 4. I don't even need a Switch 2 for Metroid Prime 4, but I like the Metroid experience. Point being, though, I love Metroid. This is a science fiction, sci-fi again, science fiction theme series set in space with a bounty hunter named Samus Aran, and she goes through these planets that are built like insane labyrinths and has to find goals and missions and find power-ups. And this is the kind of stuff I love in games. The replayability factor in Metroid games is super high. You can go through them and try to get everything. The storytelling is really cool because it's not done in like cutscenes as much as it is in subtle things happening. I just adore the Metroid series. And that even includes like the bad ones like Federation Force, which is not a bad game, it's just not a good Metroid game, and it came out at the absolute wrong time because it came between, I think, Other M and anything new. I do still like it as a game, but I do get why people hate it. I do think it's a little bit weaker, though, than a traditional Metroid game. But here's the thing. I grabbed a selection, but I have every Metroid game in my collection. I have played all of them. I have never finished, I will admit, I've never finished Metroid 1 on the NES, and I've never finished Metroid 2 on the GB, yeah, the Game Boy, because Metroid 1 and 2 don't have map systems, and so because they don't have map systems, I have a really poor sense of direction. It's hard enough for me to play these games as is. I do a lot of backtracking. It's kind of the thing. The repetition is really that's what I like about it. Is it forces you to do backtracking so I can follow the maps easier. So the only 2 games I've never finished are these 2. I also want to tell you guys, I own Metroid and Metroid 2's original cartridges. I do not own an NES or an original Game Boy. I do have Game Boy Advance stuff. I can play that cartridge. I have no way to play this. I just bought it because I love Metroid. And in fact, I do need to get a Super Nintendo or Super Metroid cartridge, even though I don't have a Super Nintendo, just to complete the set, because it's the only one I don't have a physical copy of. But, you know, like I obviously have the limited edition of Return to Samus here. We got, you know, Federation Force. I got Pinball. I need to print a better fake cover for this, because I got the cartridges loose. Hunters. I did the thing where, you know, they had the little Game Boy slot in the DS cases, right? So I have, like, you know, there's Hunters and there's Fusion. So I've got, you know, all of those. I've got all the Switch ones, you know, obviously Metroid Prime Remastered, which, by the way, if you want a really great Metroid experience, Prime Remastered is just fantastic. And I have Dread. Dread's in the big collector's box, so it's, you know, in the cabinet. But I love Metroid. I really do. And it's the thing that helps is that the series has never let me down, because I know people don't like Other M, for example. I kind of enjoyed it. And that's the kind of thing is I love the Metroid lore a lot, and so Other M's very lore-based. So there's that. You know, I got all the amiibo figures. I've got a bunch of. I can get any Metroid toy I can get my hands on that's not like out of my price range. I have. The character Samus is amazing because it's all told through experiences as opposed to just telling you straight up, and I think that's so cool, and that's such a unique thing for video games. It's such a unique thing that video games could do that you can't get in some other stuff, which is just you live the experience and now you understand what Samus has gone through. And I think that's just so cool. I love this series. I've gone through the dark times with it. I've gone through the good times. We're in good times right now. Like the fact we just got Dread, we got Prime Remaster, we got Prime 4 coming this year. I can't wait. I'm just like every time there's like a Nintendo any kind of tweet or announcement, I'm like, is it the Prime 4 date? I've been waiting like 9 years for that game, I think. 8 years? 8 years, 9 years, something like that. They announced it so long ago. They have a whole bunch of development stuff. I do, for the people that haven't played the other games, I do hope 2 and 3 are re-released because, you know, it would be nice if they got remastered, but I hope there's like a re-release of some kind because 4, I imagine, is going to tie into things. I also hope they re-release Hunters because Prime 4 has Psylocke in it, who debuted in Hunters, and then also cameoed in Federation Force, but that's not a super necessity. But maybe they'll do a recap thing. I think did Jared have a recap video that went through like the prior games? If you guys see a Metroid game guide video this year, don't be surprised. Because I really love this series. It is not the easiest series to approach and get into. The games are difficult, they're challenging, but I like that. I like the challenge, and I also like that they're challenging, but they're not super long. These are not, you know, 50, 100-hour games. Like most of these you can finish in, you know, some of these, like I can play through Zero Mission in like 2.5 hours because I know it so well. I played it several times. That's my favorite stuff for video games. It's my favorite stuff from comics and movies. This was my favorite things. I'm going to cut myself off because I will talk about Metroid all day. So I hope you enjoyed that self-indulgent video. I just kind of rambled a little bit, but I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave me any comments. Tell me your favorite things. Tell me your favorite like video game franchise. Tell me your favorite movie. Tell me your favorite comic. Just do stuff like that. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you enjoyed it. Like I said, there's plenty of other videos on the channel that are not like this, but this is just kind of a fun one. But hit like and subscribe if you haven't already to keep up with the future on the channel. Plenty of stuff coming up. It's my birthday week, so expect the next video to also be a little self-indulgent, but it may be a little bit more helpful because I think I'm just going to talk about Ghost Rider comics in my next video. I think I've decided that now, and stay tuned. On that note, though, if you want to continue the conversation, you can join our Discord server using the link below. You can also join as a channel member to get perks like early access to videos and other cool stuff. Let's give some special shout-outs to our awesome channel members. Special shout out to all of our channel members, including Captain Tears, Spin-54, MasterBen95, Forever1000, Super Shaddix Boom, Jamie's World, Jamie Harper, Mars the Star Droid, Patty, Common Spidey, Liam Peterson, Common Jojo, Mohammed Diop, Josh Frisch, K Floss, Gokai Gamer, Michael, Koopaman, Doge9789, LFIV, Matcha's Dent, Kaiju1954, Rivers, Cameron Meter, Overconception Reviews, Adam Maggle, Kyle Birdwell, Crestfallen Thoughts at Midnight, Boinkbot, Vangel Giorgio, Muhammad Faiz Daniel, Dr. Grid, Onio Nichan, David Johnson, K-Slim, and Starwho. Thank you all for your support of this channel. If you so wish, I'm on social media at Blue Sky and Letterboxd at Soundout12. You can also find my wonderful graphic designer on social media and Discord at DarkClaw643. And you can find Hero Club at hero-club.com for entertainment, interviews, reviews, and more. And until next time, this is Soundout saying goodbye.